Half the Battle is back. It's me, Daniel Levi, your host. We're going to be talking UFC Melbourne, Robert Whittaker versus Derek Brunson. It's going down this Saturday night on Fox Sports 1. First up in the bantamweight division, we got Ning Guanyou. He's minus 130. The comeback on Marlon Vera is plus 110. This fight's been a long time in the making. They've been scheduled to fight on 2 other occasions, but Ning Guanyou actually popped for clenbuterol, and he blamed it on contaminated meat. Apparently it's legit. Don't ask me, but that's what the word on the street is. But now they're going to finally meet Australia. And look, if you watched Marlon Vera's last fight and you think that that's the guy that's going to show up here, I can understand why you're picking Ning Guanyou. I mean, Guanyou, he's a short, stocky, very strong guy for the weight class. I mean, he tries to take people down to the ground. He tries to bully you. He tries to rush you. He throws big hooks. I mean, he's your prototypical short, stocky brawler. And with Marlon Vera, he hasn't had the consistency that he needs, but he's shown flashes here and there that, he can finish people off his back with triangle chokes. He can throw the flying knees. He can throw the flashy kicks. But what he did recently was, so he was training at this gym in Ecuador, 50-50, and, he got a performance of the night bonus in his fight against Roman Salazar, so he thought, I should just keep training here. And then in that fight with Davey Grant, it proved that, look, man, you got to move to the States. That's where the best training is. So ever since that fight against Davey Grant was back in February, he's been putting in work in California. I believe he's living with Ian McCall, and he's been doing all the right things. Because, look, this guy, he isn't just fighting for himself. I mean, he's got a family. He's only 23 years old. He's got 2 children, a wife, and his daughter has some kind of syndrome where she can't smile. So he's literally fighting to put a smile on his daughter's face. And I think you can expect the most motivated Marlon Vera that there's ever been. I mean, he possesses the intangibles in this fight. Just the fact that we haven't seen him since February. He changed everything. So I'm expecting a completely different Cheeto. I think he's going to finally put it all together. And I think he's going to be able to use his youthful athleticism and get Guanyou out of there. Cheeto's actually got a 6-inch reach advantage in this spot. It's all about not getting, bullied, not getting manhandled in this fight. Now, in Cheeto's last fight, so it started off, he was doing pretty well, and then he dropped for a heel hook against Davey Grant, and out of nowhere, it was against Davey, who's from the UK, and the fight was in the UK, and the ref was from the UK as well, and Mark Goddard stops the fight as Cheeto Vera goes for the heel hook, and Davey Grant was actually grabbing the fence, and the ref starts shouting at Cheeto Vera as if he was doing something wrong, and then he tries to restart them from that position, so he literally took Cheeto out of the fight mentally. I mean, watching it as a fan, I was like, the best referees, you don't notice them in there. And I felt like Mark Goddard had way too much presence in that fight. And it basically, he was shouting at Cheeto the entire fight. I just, thank God he's going to have an even playing field in this one, man. And I think he's going to get that long-needed victory. So I don't blame anyone for taking the shot. Plus 110, I'd like a better price. So I'm going to wait it out, man. But my pick is Marlon Vera. And I spoke to Ian McCall, and here's what he had to say about the improvements that Cheeto Vera's made to his game.
Cheeto has really turned his whole game around. I mean, it's not that he's ever sucked or anything, but he was just a wild animal when we first got him.
You take mine, and I'll take his.
And he's refined. We have helped refine his game, his kickboxing, his jiu-jitsu, his wrestling, so much that he's a very, very, very different fighter now. It's exciting to see. I'm stoked to call him a friend and a teammate. Yeah, he's a stud. I mean, he dropped me a while back with a body kick. I mean, that says a lot. He's a stud, man. He's a really good fighter, and I'm excited to see him perform.
Now, next up, we got Dan Hangman Hooker. He's minus 160. The comeback on Jason the Kid Knight is plus 140. Now, a lot of people think that Jason Knight is just a rubber guard guy because that's some of the things he's shown in the past. The fight with Kawajiri. He attempted the rubber guard there to get some submissions, but he was unsuccessful. However, in his fight against Musa Kamanaev, who's a very dangerous Russian fighter, Jason Knight was able to go in there and submit a guy of that caliber. And then, obviously, his last fight, the fight of the night performance-winning effort against Jim Ehlers, man, Jason Knight looked like a completely different guy. Let me tell you what I mean. So you remember his fight with Kawajiri, he gets taken down, he's going for the rubber guard. In this fight against Ehlers, he was attempting to get back up to his feet right away. His striking looked crisper than it ever looked. I mean, we got to take into consideration, this kid's only 24 years old, so he's making massive improvements. Now that he got that performance of the bonus, that performance of the night bonus in his last fight, now he can afford to train full time. And also, he's been putting in some work at Phuket Top Team. My buddy James Vick has been putting in work there, and if those two have been training together, that's the perfect guy to get ready for Dan Hooker, because Dan Hooker brings that tall man game. So what better guy to train with for a tall man than James Vick? So I think Jason Knight is addressing the proper areas in this fight. And with Dan Hooker, look, man, the guy is tough as nails in all his fights, win or lose. He comes to fight, man. But look, if you can take this guy to decision, he's 1-4 in his career when fights go to decision. So he usually has to finish you to win the fight. Jason Knight's very durable. I don't think he's going to get finished here. So if Dan Hooker were to win this decision, that would be an anomaly according to, the trend of how his fights tend to go down. But man, Dan Hooker is no slouch at all, man. He's got that long man game like I mentioned. He tries to keep it on the outside, but he's not afraid to get into a brawl, to get hit, to land his hits, man. And obviously, he's got a slick guillotine choke, as you saw in his last fight. But really what he's known for is walking you down and staying in your face for the duration of the fight. That's what he likes to do. Now, I heard an interview with Dan Hooker, and he said that, look, man, people haven't seen the new Dan Hooker. I'm not going to take as many punches anymore, and I'm going to be, I've gotten better. I'm more mature. I'm cleaner with my striking. I don't know if that's true. It might be true at first, but, we'll see what happens when he gets cracked. Because for a lot of these guys, as soon as they get hit with that one big punch, people like to say the game plan goes out the window. But more importantly, you revert to your instincts. And I think that's what could happen with Dan Hooker. He'll try to come out here playing it smart, but when Jason Knight's in his face and he's like, "What's up, motherfucker?" and he's throwing big 3-punch combos at Dan Hooker's face, and we know the deal with the tall man defense, Dan Hooker is going to get hit. I think he'll go back into that brawler mode. Now, whether he wins from that point or not, I'm not sure. But at plus 140, I really do not blame anyone for taking the shot on Jason Knight. I mean, the kid's 17-2. That means that this kid's a winner. It's very tough to beat a guy like Jason Knight. And usually the guys that do beat him, the two men that have beat him, they beat him by taking him to the ground. Now, I do believe Dan Hooker is going to look to exploit that area of the game, but I don't think it's going to be as easy as people think. And, dude, I got to go with the upset here. I'm going to go with Jason Knight for the victory. I think he's going to cash as a plus 140 dog. Now, next up in the flyweight division, we got Geane Herrera. He's minus 135. The comeback on Ben 10 Nguyen is plus 115. When this fight was announced, I thought that for sure Ben Nguyen was going to be the favorite. So it's kind of interesting to see him here at plus 115. Now, I understand because in his last fight against Louis Smolka, he took a life-changing beating, man. He took way too many punches. That fight should have been stopped way earlier. The reason it wasn't is because it was in his home away from home. Sioux Falls. I believe that's, like I said, his home away from home, man. So they were going to let him get every possible chance to survive that fight. But with Geane Herrera, he's also coming off an ass whooping too to the hands of Ali Bagotinov. I don't think it was anywhere near as bad as the one that Ben took against Louis Smolka, because that was just, we were screaming at the TV during that one. But Geane definitely, he took that ass whooping against Ali Bagotinov. But I got to tell you what, man, in that third round, he tried to come back. Even in that fight against Ray Borg, he tried to come back in that third round. Geane Herrera has heart. I just feel like they've thrown this kid to the wolves. He hasn't really had the time to develop. So this is one of those fights that we're really going to find out where both of these guys are. I feel like Geane Herrera is probably the stronger, more physical guy. He might have more of an upside. But Ben Nguyen, people call him a prospect. In my opinion, he's he's beyond that, man. He's a vet. I mean, he's had over 20 fights. So, Ben Nguyen's the experienced guy here. Is he coming back too soon? That's the biggest question here. For that reason, I cannot make a bet on this fight. If Geane was the dog, I'd probably take a shot on him. And, man, Ben Nguyen as the dog is very... it's tempting just in the sense that he is fighting in Australia again. And maybe he could overwhelm Geane Herrera with his veteran experience, because that's what people have been able to do when they beat a guy like Herrera. But I have to sit back. The fact that he took that ass whooping only a couple months ago, that's enough for me to just sit back and watch it as a fan. Now, next up, we got Jonathan Menuier. He's minus 140. The comeback on Richard Walsh is plus 120. Now, Jonathan Menuier, he's got that tri-star long man game. We've been talking about the long man game a lot on this show, but With Jonathan Menuier, it's a little bit different. When I say the TriStar game, I mean that he's a little bit cleaner with it. You know, he doesn't take as many punches. He doesn't care about getting in there and getting dirty. He'd rather be pretty. He'd rather circle on the outside, you know, do a little hand fighting and, you know, switch his stances and try to get that 30-27. You know, think about guys like Nordine Taleb. Think about guys like Rory McDonald. Think about guys like Tom Breeze. That's kind of what Jonathan Menuier is trying to bring to the table in his style. You know, he's 6'3", he's very tall for the weight class. And with Richie Walsh, I mean, look, man, he's your Australian brawler here. You know what I'm saying? He's going to try to get in your face, and either he's going to go down or Menuier is going to go down. That's the kind of fight Richie wants to get. You know, they call him filthy for a reason. He's going to try to get in there and get dirty with it. But, man, his chin has been tested more than once. And, man, you know, he has been knocked out, dude. And I think that Menuier, this is his chance to go in there and get that first UFC victory in Australia. You know, I know the crowd's going to be behind Richard Walsh, but look, man, not all of the Australians can win. I feel like this is a good spot for Jonathan to come through and get that W. So I'm going to go with Menuier here. Now, next up in the lightweight division, we got Jon Tuck. He's minus 150. The comeback on Damien beatdown Brown is plus 130. And man, this one should be good. You know, with Jon Tuck, it's really hard to get a read of him. I know what he's capable of. I mean, obviously, Abu Dhabi Jiu-Jitsu. And on the feet, I mean, when he's on his game, he throws the flying knees. He can drop dudes such as Taehyun Bong, which I don't believe anyone else in the UFC has dropped that guy. So on his best day, he's tough to deal with. And Damien Brown, man, I got to tell you what, this guy's come a long way, dude, because look, if you watch some of his regional scene fights, you know, you might be a little bit underwhelmed, but man, I got to say, he's made a statement in the UFC for my money because look, he comes in there on 4 days short notice against Alan Patrick. Now, I don't know if you guys recall Alan Patrick's last fight against Stevie Ray, but no one manhandles Stevie Ray like that. One does not simply manhandle Stevie Ray. And Alan Patrick manhandled him from pillar to post, round to round. He didn't manhandle Damien Brown. Damien Brown actually gave him some scares early in that fight, but, you know, he did gas because, you know, 4 days short notice against a beast like Patrick, who wouldn't gas in that spot? But, man, Damien performed admirably. Then he goes out in his next fight and knocks out the Bolivian Muay Thai champion. So, for my money, Damien Brown has been rather impressive in his 2 UFC appearances. This is the one that's going to tell me where he's really at, man, because, look, Jon Tuck, we mentioned how he is a bit inconsistent, but on his best day, he's someone to be reckoned with. On his worst day, you know, he can't find his range. His timing's a little bit off. And, you know, that fight with Josh Emmett, that wasn't the best Jon Tuck. So it's about which guy shows up. And you guys know I don't like using that, you know, that line of thinking or reasoning for breaking down fights. But this is really one of those situations. And, here's what Jon Tuck had to say about this upcoming fight. How do you feel about fighting Damien Brown? Because, I mean, the good news is he's the kind of guy that's going to come in and give you a real fight. You know, he's not going to try to hump your leg or he's going to try to fight you. So you excited about fighting a respectable, experienced opponent like that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm always honored to step in the cage with anybody, and I just want to show what I'm about. You know, like the Taehyun Bang fight, that was just a hint of what I actually possess. Josh Emmett was a great fighter, you know, and you know, I mean, that was a pretty close fight, being the fact that I didn't take off from the beginning. But this whole fight with Damien Brown is going to be even more exciting than any other fight in the past.
So yeah, man, it's a tough one to pick between Tuck and Brown. Obviously, you know, you do like the plus money on Damien Brown, but look, man, Jon Tuck's been putting in work with King's MMA, with Benny, with Master Haifa, with Fabricio Werdum, but we know at King's MMA, for some guys, they thrive in that environment. You look at a guy like Beneil Dariush, looking better than ever. The knockout win over James Vick, the 30-27 over Rashid Magomedov. Benny is really turning a corner. You look at a guy like Kelvin Gastelum. I know he can't get his weight under control, but the guy's been looking better than ever. But then there's other guys that they can't hang in that kind of environment. I'm not really sure where Jon Tuck falls, but one thing I do know is Beneil Dariush has been his main training partner for this fight, and he's going to corner him as well. So working with a guy like Benny can only sharpen your skills. So, you know, I understand why Jon Tuck is the favorite here, but I'm going to root for Damien Brown, so may the best man win. Now, next up, we got Chris Camozzi. He's actually a minus 265 favorite, and Daniel Kelly is plus 225. Now, firstly, this is a good fight, but the line is is quite off in my opinion. I do believe Camozzi should be the favorite. Look, he's the younger, fresher guy. I get it. He should be the favorite. But minus 265 is a little bit of disrespect to a guy like Daniel Kelly, who not only is a 4-time Olympian, but the guy's 4-1 in the UFC. He consistently comes through as the underdog, and I mean, not only is he beating, he's not just beating bums. His last fight, he knocked out Antonio Carlos Jr., the 24-year-old Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion. So Dan Kelly's no slouch. I mean, the guy is a competitor at the core. He comes to compete every damn time he steps in there. With Chris Camozzi, man, it's hard for me to get a read on him. I'll explain what I mean. I really thought that the dude was turning a corner. I mean, you guys recall, the fight with Joe Riggs. I know Joe Riggs is completely done, but look, most of the guys go to decision with him, so to finish him in 20 seconds, I mean, that was pretty damn impressive. And then his next fight against Vitor Miranda, man, Chris was the underdog in that spot, and, he really put it on Vitor. Vitor was a guy that really looked like he was coming into his own, and Chris stopped that momentum. But then going into that latest fight, I really thought, look, man, maybe Chris has really turned that corner. Maybe he's a new guy. And the old problems were exposed once again. So, yeah, I feel like we've seen the cap with Camozzi. And look, I really like the guy. He's really cool. I wish him all the best. But you know who else is cool? Dan Kelly. I mean, this guy is such a badass. 40 years old, going in there with a 4-1 UFC record and just defying the odds every single time. And now he's fighting in Australia again. Honestly, I feel like from a betting perspective, why not take the plus 225? Look, I mean, the guy, long term, it pays to bet on Dan Kelly. Let's just leave it at that. So my pick is Dan Kelly to get it done. Now, next up, we got Omari Akhmedov versus Kyle Noke. And I'm actually going to call up my buddy Kyle Rockstarzy for this fight because I hear he's got an opinion on this one. Let's see what he's got to say. Kyle, what's up, man? It's Daniel Levi.
How you doing, Dan?
Doing excellent, man. Yourself?
Pretty good.
Awesome, man. Well, I heard you had a strong opinion on Kyle Noke versus Omari Akhmedov. So let's talk about that fight, man, because look, Omari Akhmedov, he's a minus 170 favorite. The comeback on Kyle Noke is plus 150. And Kyle, I have a rule, and that rule is friends don't let friends bet on Kyle Noke. It's been very profitable to bet against Kyle Noke. However, the times that I do bet against him, his opponent's usually the underdog. In this situation, Kyle's the underdog, and he's fighting in Australia. If you remember that fight against Jonathan Webb, a lot of us felt like Webb should have got the decision, but a little hometown judging, and Kyle cashed in that spot. Now he's taking on Omari Akhmedov. We know the deal with the Russians. However, with Omari Akhmedov, he seems to gas out in the third round every single fight, and his last two opponents have been able to make him pay as they, TKO'd him in that third round. I'm talking about guys like Elizu Zaleski and Serginho Moraes. Now, the question here is, can Kyle Noke do that? I mean, we all recall his big knockout against Peter Sabata when he kicked him in the stomach and folded him. Kyle, you thinking something similar is going to happen here?
I just really liked the line that I saw. I had a bit of an outlier at plus 165. So what I did was I hit that for 2 units, expecting the line to drop. And then hopefully if Omari gets as low as minus 130, I can go 1.3 on Omari to give me basically a 1 unit bet on Kyle Noke at plus 200. So that's the angle I'm trying to get. But if I'm stuck with the 2 units at plus 165 to win 3.3, I'm cool with that too. Just because I feel like Noke is just a veteran fighter. He can fight long. He can win like you alluded to, he can win the close decision, especially in Australia. And with Omari Akhmedov, there's just a lot of red flags for me with this guy. A lot of these Russians have a good reputation, but I don't really think he holds up to a lot of them. Like you said, he's been knocked out twice in his last 2 fights, and those were both within a year. So whenever a fighter gets knocked out recently, I don't like to see that. And although his last fight was 6 months ago, I just don't like that trend. Another thing is, stylistically, what Omari likes to do is kind of just he's built like a tank. He just kind of comes in and throws winging hooks. And when you get a guy like Kyle Noke who can fight long, who kicks to the body, who uses long, straight punches, and is going to be the bigger guy, I love that dynamic, especially in Australia, because even if it's close, I think I'm getting the nod here. So it's really not a 2-unit bet. I'm trying to set up a 1-unit bet to win 2. But yeah, I like it for a lot of reasons.
Interesting, man, and best of luck on that one. Kyle Noke, on a separate note, put the fighting aside, super cool guy. I mean, that he's the former bodyguard of the crocodile hunter, Steve Irwin, man.
Yeah, it's pretty badass, eh?
Yeah, I mean, that's, one day I'm going to hire Kyle Noke to be my bodyguard. So, dude, I hope he cashes for you, man. And Kyle, you betting anything else on this card?
Yeah, so far I took a 1-unit poke on Marlon Vera when he was plus 130. I'm just looking at it now. Where is he at?
Plus 110.
Yeah, he's at plus 110, plus 120. That one, I just really feel like, again, I'm getting kind of a longer fighter who's facing an inactive guy who throws primarily hooks and tries to set up big power shots. So I always like taking that because I figure if it goes to decision, I'll take plus money on a coin flip decision any day. And stylistically, I think Marlon Vera has what it takes to win that decision. Also, I see some people saying that Ning is going to grind him out, and I don't really think that's going to happen because Marlon Vera has a very dangerous guard. And Ning, I guess he's strong and he can wrestle, but primarily what he does is hang back and look to set up big power shots. He's a Tiger Muay Thai trained striker, and usually I like those guys a lot, but with Ning, I just don't see the volume and I don't see the diversity from him. Plus, he's the older guy, so I'm expecting Marlon Vera to come in, perhaps have made some improvements, and at plus 130, I thought the price was right.
Now, Kyle, we'll talk about the intangibles that Marlon Cheeto Vera brings to the table in just a second, but you actually let me know earlier today that Ning Guanyou has actually retired before in his career?
Yeah, I'm 90% sure it was him. Watching those tough China fights, it's been a while, but he's an older guy, and I'm pretty sure he came out of retirement just to even be on the Ultimate Fighter China. So, that's another interesting dynamic where you get a guy who's in his second wave versus a young kid who's coming up who had, as you know, a very frustrating fight his last time out. So I just expect Marlon Vera to come in with some fire, and I think he's just a longer striker and he's going to get it done.
Dude, I can't even watch his last fight because as soon as he dives for that heel hook and, Mark Goddard stops him and then restarts him, I was just like, oh my God. And then you see Davey Grant's grabbing the fence. I'm like, what is going on here? And, it looked like a deep heel hook to me, man, and they try to reset the position. You don't reset a position like that. You know what I mean?
100%. And I think there's a fine line between a ref being like stern and controlling the octagon, and then a ref kind of getting annoyed at a fighter for talking back. We're all human, right? Like, his personality comes out, or he made it personal, but there's just no room for that in the octagon, in my opinion. And I thought, although Goddard, for the most part, is a good ref, he kind of was a little bit too harsh on Marlon in that fight. Not only, I think he did take a point, right?
Oh, yeah, he did. And, I mean, dude, he just overexerted himself in a way that he shouldn't have. He made himself part of the fight. There's a saying that the best referees are the ones you don't notice. And what that means is that, yeah, exactly. You can watch the fight take place, but in this one, we were paying more attention to the ref than we were the actual fight, and it should never be like that. And then, he goes on a 2-paragraph Facebook rant the next day. I was like, oh, my God, like, what is this guy doing? But hopefully he's not reffing this fight. It's not in the UK. It's in Australia. He's not fighting in Australia, and so I expect all that aspect of the game to be fair, and we're going to have to see who the better man is. So, Kyle, man, thanks for checking in, buddy. Anything else you're playing on the card?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that last one, because one thing I really am keeping my eye on is the fight of the night prop for Dan Hooker versus Jason Knight. The reason being is I'm looking down this card and I see a lot of finish potential and a lot of inactive fighters. And then all of a sudden you get Dan Hooker versus Jason Knight, two guys who are roughly the same age, around the same level, in my opinion, who will throw a lot of volume and who are both very difficult to get out of there. So that, to me, is the perfect recipe on a card like this to hit that fight of the night prop if your bookie offers it.
There you have it, folks. Thanks again, Kyle.
All right, no problem, Dan.
That's my buddy Kyle Rockstarzy. Thank you, Kyle. Now, next up in the lightweight division, we got Jake Matthews. He's minus 360. The comeback on Andrew Holbrook is plus 300. Now, we all know that Jake Matthews is one of the most promising prospects in the UFC lightweight division. I know he's had a couple setbacks. The fight with James Vick, James flying kneed him and then choked him out with that beautiful guillotine. But I got to tell you what, man, the kid was 19 or 20 years old when that happened? Everyone has to take that first UFC loss. We always talk about it every single episode of the show, and that was just Jake's time to take his. He rebounded since that fight. Obviously, the fight with Akbar Arreola showed a ton of heart, overcoming that head kick and then coming back to pound him out. And then the next fight with Johnny Case, that was the best performance of Jake Matthews' career, in my opinion. I mean, he showed a lot of maturity in that fight. Now, the next one with Kevin Lee, it obviously didn't go his way at all, but, I'm going to make an excuse for him. What I'm going to say is that, look, the kid is still super young. We can't forget that. And I feel like he underestimated the flight from Australia over to the States. When Robert Whittaker fought Rafael Natal in Vegas, Robert Whittaker came over 3 weeks in advance to acclimate to, the time difference, because look, it's literally a day ahead in Australia, you know what I'm saying? So you have to go in advance to acclimate. You don't get around it. Robert Whittaker did that. Jake Matthews came in like a couple days before the fight. He totally underestimated it, and he paid for it big time. He looked lethargic out there. I don't think that's the Jake Matthews we're going to see in this fight, in Australia this time. And Andrew Holbrook, look, he's a Chris Lytle protege in his UFC debut against Ramsey Nijem. I know a lot of people thought Nijem won, but I got to tell you what, Holbrook is a very gritty guy. I know he's a bit chinny. He did get rocked more than once in that fight. But look, man, he's got a slick jiu-jitsu game, and he comes to fight. He'll stay in your face the entire fight. And as long as he's conscious, he is going to try to win. He's not going to run away. He's going to be in your face. So Jake Matthews is in for a fight, and, he can't get surprised by, this guy's pressure. He's got to be there the entire time. But the thing is with Matthews is there's such a big difference in athleticism. And if you watch that Jake Matthews versus Johnny Case fight, you remember that big right hand that Jake Matthews was getting off on? I feel like if he throws that thing here, he can knock out Holbrook. Because look, Holbrook's fight against Joaquim Silva, we saw that, man, it wasn't a coincidence that he was getting rocked a lot against Ramsey Nijem. He really is a bit chinny, and that's why he got knocked out cold in 30 seconds in his last fight. This could be Jake Matthews' first legitimate knockout stoppage in the UFC. He's just got to rise to the occasion and show up. And, he's a minus 360 favorite for a reason. I'm not counting out Holbrook. Look, he trains with good guys. He spent this camp at Tiger Muay Thai. Much respect, but I got to go with Jake Matthews for the victory here, inside the distance. Now, next up, the main event of the evening. We got Derek Brunson. He's a minus 140 favorite. The comeback on Robert the Reaper Whittaker is plus 120. And oh my God, isn't this such a great fight? Like, for a fact that these two are going to leave no doubt when they get in there, because the stakes and the implications for the winner, it's just, you can't measure it. Because look, the 185-pound division is looking better than it's ever looked. Obviously, Bisping's going to fight Yoel Romero for the title. You got Luke Rockhold, Weidman, Jacare, all these killers at 185 pounds. And here you got Derek Brunson and Robert Whittaker, who, they're the ones that they've never tasted the gold before. They're hungry. They're motivated. With Robert Whittaker, man, I got to tell you what, man, this dude has come a long way. The way he sets up his hooks, I mean, you watch that fight against Brad Tavares, the rear leg front kick to the left hook. I mean, it was just on point. He knows how to find your chin. He's pinpoint. He moves his head. And, the one thing that worries me about a guy like Whittaker is the same thing that worries me about someone such as Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. They got that karate style, so they fight with their hands down. And you can't get away with that every single time. But the reason he's able to do that is because he knows his distance, he knows his range, and he's really an expert striker out there. He's so light on his feet. He knows how to cut those angles. If he's got to throw a leg kick, he's going to throw the leg kick. He'll slightly dip his head and go up high. And, man, the way he throws those hooks, like I just said, dude, they come out of nowhere, and he hits hard, man. With Derek Brunson, his last 4 fights have been absolutely flawless. I got to give him all the credit in the world, because he's, that fight with Sam Alvey, he turned up on Sam Alvey. What he'll do is, you'll start off, he'll push you up against the fence, you'll pummel for double underhooks, and as he's starting to disengage, that's when he comes at you with this blitz out of nowhere. And man, no one has been able to stop that blitz lately. And man, it's not just 3 punches, it's like 20 punches, you know what I'm saying? And he goes until he gets you out of there. But here's the thing, guys. In the middle of that blitz, he does a couple things fundamentally wrong. He hasn't been penalized for it because he's so damn athletic and powerful and fast that the guys he's been competing with just cannot capitalize on. But what he does wrong, and when I'm saying what he does wrong, it's with all due respect. I completely understand that he would knock me out cold with the first punch he would throw. I get it. But, we're betting on these fights. So that's where my criticism is coming from. So just understand that. But what I'm trying to say here, guys, is that the fundamental flaws he has when he goes for that blitz is, we're going to talk about the chin in a second, but he squares up his stance, man. And what I mean by the square stance is, his feet are literally parallel from each other. He's standing in the same place. It's not like one's in front of the other. They're literally parallel. And then on top of that, he doesn't just lift his chin up a little bit. His chin is sky high. But the reason that no one's been able to capitalize is, like I mentioned, he blinds them with his speed. And by the time they know that, he's coming after them, they're already rocked and the fight's almost over. So he's been able to capitalize on great situations. You know who's going to be able to counter in a spot like that? I think Whittaker's expert striking can get him a counter knockout if Derek attempts to go for the blitz here. But we got to talk about the wrestling. You recall that fight between Derek Brunson and Lorenz Larkin. Now, dude, Lorenz Larkin was getting off on the striking in that fight. That's what a good striker looks like against Derek Brunson. But Lorenz wasn't strong enough to stuff the takedowns. Hence, why Lorenz dropped to 170. He's more of a welterweight. With Whittaker, this guy was killing himself to make 170. He's a middleweight. And, dude, look, I know he's never fought a wrestler of the caliber of Derek Brunson. But you know what? I'm not going to judge or, predict his takedown defense based on that. What I'm going to say is the times that he has stuffed takedowns, he showed very good technique. And that goes a long way. You watch a guy like Conor McGregor and he's, teeing off on Marcus Brimage. Well, just because he teed off on Marcus Brimage, that doesn't mean that he's going to be able to, knock out a guy like Jose Aldo, right? Well, it's not the fact that he teed off on Marcus Brimage. It's the technique that he displayed while teeing off on Marcus Brimage that led me to believe, yeah, he can beat these better caliber fighters. And that's the same thing with Robert Whittaker here, man. I feel like his technique is on another level than Derek Brunson. And, Derek's been the faster guy, the more athletic guy than all these people he's been fighting. But I don't think he's going to be faster than Robert Whittaker. I think Whittaker's got the speed advantage in this fight. So, look, man, if Brunson can go out there and starch Whittaker like he's been doing to all these other guys, hey, I'll tip my cap. Much respect. Because one doesn't simply do that to Robert Whittaker. You watch his fight with Wonder Boy, and, people just remember the knockout. But what they don't remember is that Whittaker was the only guy to literally try to get into a striking match with Wonder Boy up until that point. Everyone else, they had no clue how to strike with him. They were all running away from him. I know my boy Matt Brown got him to the ground, but Whittaker, he was establishing his jab. He was out jabbing Wonder Boy, and he got caught with a nice counter. But man, Whittaker held his own, and ever since he moved up to 185, he looks like a completely different man. These two are in their prime right now. I know actually, I take that back. Derek Brunson is in his prime right now. I don't think Robert Whittaker has even hit his prime yet. The kid's only, 25, 26 years old? He's just a kid, but he's wise beyond his years, man, and I think he's going to get Derek Brunson out of there. So I took the 2-unit shot on Robert Whittaker at plus 125. Look, may the best man win. And, I hit up my boy Biggie Rhodes because he fought Robert Whittaker. He went 3 rounds with him. I want to hear what he has to say. So let's hit up Biggie Rhodes real quick. Robert Whittaker's taking on Derek Brunson. How you see that one going down?
Honestly, that's a tough one, man, because ever since me and Robert fought, I've had such a respect for him. And, we follow each other's careers. We're always chatting back and forth. And he's turned to an absolute world beater, after we fought. And Derek Brunson is somebody that I connected with through the Twitter universe. And, he's a good dude, great guy, great personality on Twitter and things of that nature. And he's an awesome fighter who just, they both have victories over Uriah Hall in 2 different kind of ways. Robert dominated him, and then Brunson got him out of there fairly quickly. I think we're in for an awesome fight. I can't really pick a winner in this fight. It just depends on whether or not Robert will be able to stop the wrestling and also the power that Derek Brunson possesses. And then if Derek can get, if Robert can stuff the takedowns and land his shot. But I think it's a great matchup at 185 pounds. I'm just going to stay away from picking a winner on that one.
And that's my boy Mike Biggie Rhodes. Thanks, Biggie. And yeah, I'm going with Robert Whittaker here. I think there's going to be a big speed difference and a big technique difference. You know, it's not always about the technique. Sometimes the more athletic guy wins, and Derek Brunson is the more athletic guy. But I think in a spot like this, technique really will prevail. And whether Whittaker gets him out of there or whether it goes, you know, the full 5-round distance, I got Robert the Reaper Whittaker in this spot. And like I said, I put 2 units on it. So best of luck to me, right? But let's talk about some of these early prelims. So, man, we got Janel Lausa. He's minus 135, and the comeback on Zhikui is plus 115. Man, I'll keep it short. Look, one guy is 6-2. Janel Lausa is 6-2. Zhikui is 2-4. So when you see those records, you're like, well, I'm going to take the 6-2 guy all day. But then you look into it, and my God, you know, I think for the Filipino scene, he's probably talented, but, you know, when you talk about flat-footed Muay Thai, because a lot of people like to disrespect Muay Thai, and you shouldn't be disrespecting Muay Thai, but when you do, you talk about guys like Janel Lausa, because, I mean, dude, his guard is completely open on the feet. He's got no takedown defense. He is a bit athletic, though. He's more athletic than Zhikui. But Zhikui's got the UFC experience. You know, he's been the decision a couple times. In his last fight, though, he got slammed, and he broke his arm right away, so... Man, this one's tough to call. I got to go with Janel Lausa, but I mean, you know, do yourself a favor. Do not bet this fight. Now, next up, we got Seo Hee Ham. She's minus 115. The comeback on Danielle Taylor is minus 105. And these two are going to scrap it out. You know, Seo Hee Ham, she's a little wild brawler out there, man. She's exciting. And Danielle Taylor, you know, she's super short for the weight class, and she's kind of inactive. You know, she kind of only throws one shot at a time. You know, she does have a big bomb. You know, she throws one big shot at a time. But here's the thing, man. A lot of people say in her last fight against Moroz that, you know, she actually looked pretty good. I disagree. I thought they both looked pretty bad in that fight. You know, they were both completely inactive, and it's about, can Danielle Taylor connect with a big shot here? Because if she doesn't, she's going to get picked apart and lose the decision. So I'm going to go with Seo Hee Ham via unanimous decision. And next up, we got Khalil Rountree, minus 145. The comeback on Tyson Pedro is plus 125. Now, Khalil Rountree trains with Anderson Silva, very dynamic striking, but the biggest issue is getting back up from the bottom. You know, his takedown defense isn't that bad until he gets gassed, but man, he cannot get up off the bottom. Tyson Pedro is an Australian grappler, so, you know, can he take down a guy like Khalil Rountree? We're going to find out, man. Please do not bet this fight unless you know something I don't know. I mean, I'm going to go with Khalil Rountree by knockout, but, you know, just stay away from this one. Now, next up, we got Alex Volkanovski. Minus 165. The comeback on Yusuke Kasuya is plus 145. Now, Volkanovski is a very hyped Australian prospect. He's 10-1. You know, he's a short, stocky, very strong guy. He knows how to win the fights on the feet and on the ground. He's finished guys. He's won by decision. He's very experienced. But Yusuke Kasuya is also experienced, but he is coming off a bit of a layoff. You know, he likes to take guys to the ground and choke them out, but I'll tell you what, he fought pretty competitively against Nick Hein. A lot of people thought he might have won that Nick Hein fight, and in this spot, you know, we're going to have to see what Alex Volkanovski is all about. I see a lot of people confident in betting on him, you know, and maybe they're right. Maybe he's going to go out there and get the victory, but for me, look, it's that UFC debut. Let's see what the hype's all about, man, because I never heard of this kid up until this point, so, you know, let's see if he's the real deal. So we'll go with Alex Volkanovski because I feel like this is one of those matchups where they're bringing in Kasuya to lose, you know, try to get Alex that nice first UFC victory. So let's see what he's all about. Now we got to talk about the fight to watch and the fighter to watch. So the fight to watch, I mean, look, it's obviously the main event. The winner of this fight, they're going to propel themselves to maybe one fight away from a UFC title shot in the middleweight division, and they're both representing the future of that division. Even though Derek Brunson is in his 30s and, you know, Robert's in his mid-20s, I still feel like they're both evolving and just becoming the best versions of themselves that we've ever seen. And the style matchup, the contrast in their styles is just awesome. We got the wrestler versus the striker, but don't underestimate that wrestler because he's coming off 4 straight knockouts. I mean, first round knockouts. Firstly, I forgot to mention this in my breakdown of the fight that that Derek Brunson has 12 first round finishes and Robert Whittaker has 10 first round finishes. That's what we're dealing with in this main event. It's going to be absolute fireworks. That's your fight to watch. Fighter to watch, I'm going to go with Jake Matthews. Look, I know he's a minus 360 favorite, but look, he's got the co-main event slot in Australia. He's coming off a devastating first-round loss to Kevin Lee, where he was the favorite in that spot. I want to see how he rebounds because all the pressure's on him in this spot. You know, Holbrook's expected to lose, so I want to see how Matthews performs in this high-pressure situation. So for that reason, he is your fighter to watch. Now, I want to thank you guys so much for taking the time to check out Half the Battle. It's been awesome breaking down the fights, and I cannot wait to watch them. Happy Thanksgiving to you all in the United States of America. We'll be back next week with Sean Carey to break down the next card. And as always, interviewing the fighters, just asking them the questions no one else asks. And I really appreciate the support. Keep up the retweets. It was funny. I was getting some shit because I was retweeting the podcast. Look, it's all good. It's all love here, man. You got to get the word out there, man. I mean, look, this is for the hardcore fans, and it's awesome to be a part of this community. So, follow me on Twitter at BestFightPicks. Go to bestfightpicks.com for the plays. Subscribe to Half the Battle on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Stitcher. And until the next time, let's cash these bets.